You ever seen one small act of kindness tear straight through a billion-dollar lie? Blood ran down the boy's knee as his sobs echoed on the sidewalk, just another sound in New York's daily storm of noise. Nobody stopped. Nobody looked. But Zoe did. A homeless black woman with nothing in her pocket but a handkerchief she'd traded her last meal for. Hunger clawed at her ribs, but that cry, it shattered every defense she'd built to survive. "Hey, little one, let me see that." Her dark, cracked fingers, tired from life's beatdowns, gently reached out to help a boy no one else would see. What she didn't know was his father stood just feet away, a millionaire in polished shoes, watching the whole thing unfold. And what he didn't know? That the woman he almost ignored was about to shake the very foundation of everything he built. Because when you've lost everything but your humanity, you become the one thing power can't buy, and the one truth it can't hide from. But first, leave a comment below to let us know where you are watching from, and if you like fascinating stories like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we have another incredible story, and there are many surprises waiting for you in the next parts. Zoe didn't flinch at the blood or the stares. She just went to work like somebody who knew pain firsthand. She pulled out the white cloth like it was gold, neatly folded, clean, and too precious for anyone to guess how much it cost her. Noah the boy calmed down real quick. Kids know when someone's real. She tied his shoelace, wiped the tears off his cheek, and cracked a little smile. "Looks like them pigeons got you runnin'," she said. "Gotta be quicker than the crumbs, huh?" Noah giggled, still sniffly but already forgetting the fall. And then, like only a child could, he asked, "Why are you so dirty?" For a second, everything froze. You could feel the weight of that question hang in the air, like a storm waiting to hit. Zoe didn't flinch, didn't apologize. She just said it plain. "'Cause not everyone gets to live on the lucky side, little man." No bitterness, no shame, just truth that didn't need dressing up. Sometimes we lose things, homes, jobs, people, but we don't lose our heart. And that's what keeps us human. Meanwhile, Richard Montgomery, Noah's dad, standing a few feet away, was having the kind of moment money can't buy. His first instinct had been to pull his son away, protect, control. But instead he just watched, disarmed, by a stranger's grace that made his own life look hollow. What hit Richard hardest wasn't what Zoe said. It was how she said it. Like she'd already made peace with being unseen, but hadn't let it make her unkind. And now he was standing there like the richest ghost in Manhattan, watching a woman with nothing give more than he ever had. He opened his mouth to speak, to thank her maybe, but Zoe was already gone. Like smoke, like a lesson, like a warning. Noah tugged at his sleeve. "She was hungry, Dad. I heard her stomach." Richard didn't say anything. What could he say? That he hadn't even noticed? That the only reason he'd paused was because his son fell, not because someone was hurting? That night, Richard couldn't sleep. Not because of guilt, but because of recognition. Something in that moment with Zoe had pulled the rug out from under everything he thought he understood about power, worth, and decency. He kept replaying her voice, her words, the way Noah had looked at her like she was the hero in his day. And across town, under a metal awning that smelled like grease and rot, Zoe tried not to think about any of it. She'd helped a child. That was enough. Or so she told herself. But life? Life was about to circle back, because sometimes the person you save turns out to be the spark that lights up everything the world tried to burn down. Do you ever be so hungry your stomach sounds like it's talking trash? Zoe was that kind of hungry, and still made time to care for someone else's kid. And now, 2 days later, her gut was still empty, but her mind was full. Full of that little boy's smile. Full of the way he looked at her like she wasn't invisible. Like she mattered. Noah, she remembered. That was his name. And even though she tried not to, she thought about him more than she should have. She tried to shove the memory out like an unpaid bill, but it kept showing up. Meanwhile, across town, Richard Montgomery couldn't shake her either. couldn't forget how she'd moved. Calm, gentle, like dignity didn't need permission, and now Noah kept asking, "Where's the scarf lady, Dad? Did you find her yet?" Richard had the resources to track anyone, but it wasn't that easy. Zoe didn't have a phone, no address, no social footprint. She was a ghost in a city that didn't like to admit ghosts existed. And Richard, he had his own ghosts now. Regret, shame, and something unfamiliar that felt a lot like conscience. He'd canceled 2 meetings just to stare at the same footage on repeat. Zoe kneeling on the sidewalk, wiping Noah's knee like it was sacred. A woman with nothing, giving everything. It didn't make sense in his world, but it made something in his chest ache, something that hadn't been touched in years. Meanwhile, Zoe got hit with the city's latest trick, a temporary closure of her shelter. That's code for move out so rich folks don't have to see you during their gala. Cops showed up with clipboards and faces set like concrete. "You've got 20 minutes, they said, like compassion was clocked in shifts. Zoe didn't argue. She'd been through this game before. She folded up her blanket, her toothbrush, her worn-down resume, and that tattered little diary she always kept close. Some folks held on to Bibles. Zoe held on to documentation. Her own record of every rejection, every cold shoulder, every time she showed up ready and was told she didn't fit the image. That's when Marcus appeared. Weathered jacket, eyes like he'd seen too much and still wasn't done fighting. "Zoe," he said, tapping her shoulder. "There's a program. Fresh Start Foundation. They're hiring folks who've lived through this, real experience, not just degrees." Zoe laughed, dry and tired. "Experience? You mean getting denied 100 times and still waking up?" Marcus didn't flinch. "I mean surviving with dignity. I've seen your file. Bachelor's in business. HR experience. You were somebody before this." She shook her head. "I still am. The world just don't see it." Marcus handed her a card. "Go tomorrow. Just walk in. Use my name." She showed up soaked. Rain dripping off her coat, puddling at her feet, like even the weather wanted to remind her where she stood. The receptionist looked up, saw her clothes, and instantly pulled the polite mask over her face. "Can I help you?" she asked, like she meant leave. Zoe straightened her spine anyway. "I'm here about the job. Marcus Williams sent me." That got a twitch. Not quite respect, but enough to stop the slow-motion dismissal. Still, the woman tilted her head, eyes scanning Zoe's everything. "Are you sure you're in the right place?" Before Zoe could answer, a voice cut through the static. "She's exactly where she should be." And that's when Amara walked in, heels clicking, blazer sharp, voice calm like she didn't raise it often because she didn't need to. She walked straight up to Zoe and offered her hand, firm and direct. "Vanessa Marachun, executive director here. You must be Zoe." No hesitation, no fake sympathy, just recognition. In that second, Zoe felt something crack open. A door, maybe. Or maybe it was her own doubt stepping aside. Amara led her into a small office. No fancy artwork, no motivational posters. Just truth. "We don't do pity here, Zoe. We do power. We're not just trying to get people off the streets. We're trying to fix the machine that put them there." Zoe blinked, the words settling on her skin like warm water. Amara didn't flinch, didn't tiptoe. "We need people who get both sides, the pain and the policy. You've seen the cracks, and you know how the surface looks. You're the bridge." Zoe sat there, still dripping, still unsure, but something in her eyes shifted. Amara slid a folder across the desk. "This is what we're working on next, Montgomery Enterprises." The name hit Zoe like a slap. She didn't flinch, didn't speak, just nodded. She tucked the name away like a nail she'd one day use. What Amara didn't know, what Zoe wouldn't say yet, was that she'd already met the Montgomery family. She'd wiped their son's knee with her last ounce of dignity. She left the foundation that day with nothing but a cup of coffee and a tiny spark of something she hadn't carried in years. Momentum. The storm was still pouring, but her step was different. She didn't know it yet, but the winds were shifting. Because she didn't just walk into that building for a job, she walked into her own revolution. Do you ever get shut down by a company, then find out you're working to shut it down right back? Yeah, Zoe just pulled that Uno reverse. 1 week into her gig at the foundation, and she's already neck-deep in research that smells like old money and fresh hypocrisy. The mission's clear. Investigate corporate land grabs hiding behind the pretty word revitalization, and guess who's the poster child? Montgomery Enterprises. Zoe didn't flinch when she saw the name. She didn't drop the coffee cup in her hand. She just blinked once, tucked it deep in her chest, and went to work. She didn't tell Amara about Noah or the sidewalk or the handkerchief. Some things you hold close until the world's ready to hear them. Her job was simple but heavy. Track the people who'd been pushed out, homes bulldozed in the name of progress, neighborhoods turned into luxury wine bars, families split because renovation came with an eviction notice. Zoe walked through what used to be homes and heard the silence where kids once laughed. She talked to mothers who held job contracts in one hand and eviction papers in the other. It was like pulling thread on a sweater that had already started to unravel. Every tug revealed something worse. Names, documents, loopholes. The system wasn't broken. It was designed this way. And while she logged every story in that same beat-up diary she kept in her backpack, Zoe started noticing patterns. The same developer, the same contracts, and the same middleman showing up over and over. Montgomery Enterprises. The company that looked squeaky clean on the outside, with diversity brochures and smiling stock photos, but the back end, it reeked. They funded projects that cleared out entire blocks and called it progress. The same blocks where the shelters got shut down, where Zoe used to sleep. Funny how maps look different depending on who holds the pen. Then came the twist she didn't see coming. She's reviewing hiring records, public filings, HR case studies, internal job policies leaked through back doors, and bam, a familiar name. James Peterson, Director of Diversity and Inclusion at Montgomery Enterprises. Zoe had to reread it twice. She knew that name. Knew it too well. 3 years ago, she'd sat across from him in an interview, wearing her best thrift store blazer and too much hope. She'd smiled through every coded question, answered with poise even when he said her energy didn't quite match the company image. That man had smiled while handing her a rejection letter that pushed her closer to the street. Now, he was giving TED Talks about equity. Zoe didn't scream, didn't cry. She just flipped open her diary and found the page, dated, documented. His name, his words. She circled them again, harder this time. Didn't match the image. And now, here he was, sitting on top of a throne built out of buzzwords and bullshit. But this time, she wasn't knocking on his door. She was building the report that could tear the door off the hinges. Meanwhile, back in his glass tower, Richard Montgomery couldn't sleep. Not the tossing and turning kind, but the wide awake at 3 a.m. kind where your soul won't shut up. Something about that moment on the sidewalk with Zoe had cracked his shell, and it wouldn't stop echoing. He started making calls, not to find her, but to find out why he couldn't forget her. He ordered reports on homelessness near Montgomery construction sites, quiet reviews on eviction practices, ethics audits his own board didn't know about, and what he found made his gut twist. He saw graphs that looked like progress and felt like poison. Noah didn't let it go either. Every morning, over cereal or piano practice or Legos scattered across marble floors, it was the same question. Did you find the scarf lady yet? Richard would smile and say, "Not yet, buddy." But inside, the words hit like bricks. He didn't know her name, didn't even have a clear photo, just the memory of that smile and the way she made his son feel safe in a world that had been built to ignore her. Zoe, for her part, stayed quiet. She never mentioned the Montgomery connection to Amara. Not yet. She wanted proof first. Real proof. The kind you could lay out in front of cameras and lawyers and make the whole machine stutter. So she kept pulling thread, and the sweater kept falling apart, and in her spare time, if you could call late-night subway rides and shelter check-ins spare, she added names to her journal. Every interview, every rejection, every subtle dig masked as professionalism. She'd spent years carrying her pain in silence. Now it was evidence. And the crazy thing? No one at Montgomery Enterprises knew the bomb they were sitting on. Zoe had a journal full of receipts, and she was only just warming up. The banners said, "Innovation through inclusion." The room smelled like cologne, corporate coffee, and self-congratulation. This was Montgomery Enterprises' annual Diversity and Inclusion Conference, where CEOs clapped for graphics and HR directors recycled buzzwords like they were saving the planet. Zoe walked in wearing a borrowed blazer, her nerves wrapped tight under a smile so fake it should have had a barcode. But behind that smile, fire. She wasn't here to be seen. She was here to show them something. Amara gave her a nod from across the room. They'd rehearsed the script, but Zoe had already made a decision. She wasn't reading it. Backstage, Richard stood off to the side, arms crossed, expression unreadable. He wasn't part of the panel, just watching, evaluating. He still hadn't connected Zoe to the woman from the sidewalk. His brain had been too clouded with spreadsheets and damage control. But the feeling in his chest? That was the same weight he'd felt watching her tie Noah's shoelace with hands that should have been holding a resume, not a kid's scabbed-up knee. His gut told him this conference wasn't going to go as planned. He just didn't know how right he was. The lights dimmed. James Peterson took the stage first, smooth as ever, grinning like a politician at a press junket. "Under my leadership," he said, "we've increased minority hiring by 75%. He clicked the remote, and the screen behind him filled with smiling brown faces. None in leadership, none behind the podium, all stock photos. Zoe sat still in her chair on the panel row, waiting, breathing, not blinking. Amara leaned forward slightly. She knew Zoe wasn't going to stick to the script. And honestly, she was rooting for it. Then came her turn. James flashed a tight smile. "Next up, we welcome one of our proud partners from the Fresh Start Foundation. Zoe Williams, everyone." Polite applause. Nothing real. Zoe stood up slowly, walked to the podium, and looked out at a sea of suits who probably crossed the street when they saw someone like her a few years ago. She began. "I sat in the lobby of this very company, wearing my best second-hand suit, holding a resume I was proud of. I was told my energy didn't fit the brand." The air shifted. James's smile flickered. "That rejection didn't just cost me a job. It cost me my home, my safety, my place in this world, but it gave me something else, a reason to speak." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. James sat straighter, his face now tight. "Let's stay on topic," he muttered into his mic. Zoe didn't flinch. "On the streets, I met dozens more like me. College grads, veterans, professionals, pushed out not because they weren't good, but because someone decided they didn't fit." She reached into her pocket and clicked a small remote. The screen behind her flickered. Video began to play. James Peterson, in a private meeting, laughing. "Sure, we want diversity," he said. "Put it on the website, not in the boardroom." The room went dead silent. Another clip followed. "Give the lower floors some color, hit the quota, and keep the exec seats safe." Zoe stood like a statue, eyes locked forward. James shot to his feet. "This is taken out of context," he barked. Zoe turned toward him, calm. "I have the full recordings and the hiring data. 89% rejection rate for black candidates with qualifying experience, most denied with vague excuses. Like mine." Richard's heart started pounding. His mind raced. That voice, that tone, that truth. It wasn't just professional, it was personal. It was her. The woman with the scarf. The handkerchief. The one who helped his son while he stood there useless. He stepped forward, slow at first, then faster. His staff tried to stop him. He waved them off. The crowd's eyes followed him as he walked up to the stage. Zoe turned, unsure what to expect. Would he defend his brand, protect his people, spin it like every other CEO? He took the mic. His voice didn't shake. "As CEO of Montgomery Enterprises," he said, "I take full responsibility." Gasps rippled. Peterson's jaw dropped. Zoe blinked. Richard continued, voice clear as glass. "Not just for the failures in our hiring practices, but for the culture we've allowed to thrive behind closed doors. The culture I helped create." He looked at Zoe, and for the first time really saw her. "Miss Williams," he said, "you didn't just show us what's wrong, you showed us what courage looks like, and starting today, James Peterson is no longer employed by this company." The auditorium froze. Nobody breathed. Even the lies printed on the brochures seemed to hold their breath, because when Richard said, "I take full responsibility," even the walls knew something had finally cracked. The room still hadn't recovered when Richard stepped down from the stage. James Peterson was ghost-pale, frozen in place, eyes darting like someone caught with their hand in the donation jar. Security didn't drag him out. They didn't need to. The silence did all the work. Zoe stood still, not triumphant, not smug, just steady. The kind of steady you only learn after years of sleeping with one eye open. Amara met her at the bottom of the stairs with a look that said, "It's yours now." Richard didn't say much then, just leaned in and asked, "Can we talk privately?" Behind closed doors without cameras or mics, Richard looked smaller. Not physically, he was still every bit the polished empire man, but something in his shoulders had let go. "Zoe," he said, almost whispering, "I didn't know it was you, the woman from the sidewalk, the one who helped my son." Zoe blinked, but didn't answer. She didn't need to. He continued, "I've built a fortress so tall I couldn't see the truth standing right in front of me." He handed her a folder. "This is a job offer, Director of Social Impact. No fluff. Real power, real change, and full control." Zoe opened it, but didn't look down. "You sure you're ready for someone who doesn't fit the image?" He smiled, not wide, but honest. "I think the image needs changing." Within weeks, press releases dropped, not the usual PR gloss, but raw announcements of sweeping changes. A full internal audit of hiring practices, a third-party ethics board, and then came the one that made headlines: Montgomery Enterprises to fund citywide housing programs. The first center opened right where Zoe's old shelter had been bulldozed. It offered beds, job training, childcare, therapy, and, most importantly, no expiration dates. They called it Project Handkerchief. Noah came up with the name. When a reporter asked why, he said, because that's what started it. Her handkerchief. It wasn't just a bandage. It was hope. Zoe didn't want her name on buildings. She wanted results. And she got them. Within months, over 200 people had been rehoused, retrained, and re-employed. Some worked inside Montgomery Enterprises. Some joined the foundation. Some just got a shot at starting over. But the part that caught her off guard came folded in an envelope, handwritten, no return address. It read, "You don't know me, but 3 years ago you gave me half your sandwich in a shelter. You said I looked hungrier than you. I never forgot. Today I walked through the doors of Project Handkerchief. I'm next in line to start over." Zoe read it 3 times before setting it down, hands trembling. She thought about how many tiny kindnesses she'd handed out like loose change, thinking they'd disappeared. But they didn't. They multiplied. The chain reaction she'd never meant to start was growing legs of its own. People she hadn't seen in years were showing up with resumes and hope. One man said, "You looked me in the eye once. That's why I believed this program was real." Another, "You held my place in line at the food bank when I passed out from heat. You didn't let them forget me." These weren't grand gestures, just crumbs. But somehow crumbs had built a trail back to humanity. Richard watched it all from a distance, trying to keep up. He learned the names of his maintenance staff. Started taking the subway once a week. Sometimes he just walked the streets, no agenda, just looking, seeing. Noah, too, had changed. He now brought extra snacks to school just in case. Once, when a classmate made fun of a janitor, Noah stood up and said, "That lady runs a program that saved my dad's company. Watch your mouth." And that was it. No speech, no lecture, just truth, delivered like a handkerchief. Quiet, clean, personal. The company still had flaws. Nothing flips overnight. But now there were voices in the room who didn't have to raise their volume to be heard. Zoe had built something that couldn't be undone with a new logo or some performative checklist. She had turned survival into strategy, kindness into structure. And the funny thing? They'd tried to erase her, walk past her, deny her, forget her. But now, she was blueprinting the fix. The ballroom was packed, chandeliers humming above hundreds of people in tailored suits, but all eyes were on Richard Montgomery. He stepped up to the podium, no tie, sleeves rolled slightly, a man no longer dressed for power but for truth. His voice didn't boom. It didn't need to. "For years," he said, "I thought privilege meant earning what others couldn't. But the truth is, privilege isn't just what you have. It's what you've never had to think about." You could hear the forks pause mid-air, wine glasses stilled halfway to lips. He wasn't selling anything, he was confessing. "I spent decades building walls to protect my fortune," he continued, "when I should have been building bridges to share opportunity." Backstage, Zoe listened, arms folded, heart steady. This wasn't the same man who had clutched a leather briefcase and stood frozen while she cleaned his son's scraped knee. This man had unlearned silence, had started listening. After the speech, Richard found her in the corner, holding a small box that had been left on her chair. No card, just a note tucked under the lid, written in a child's handwriting, "For your next beginning." Inside was a perfectly folded, new white handkerchief. Not expensive, not fancy. Just clean, just full of meaning. She smiled and held it close to her chest, like it was more valuable than any title they'd ever given her. Noah now followed Zoe through hallways, workshops, and community centers like a shadow with purpose. At 9 years old, he had the kind of heart you don't teach, you just protect. One day, he tugged on Zoe's sleeve mid-conversation and said, "I want to help people like you." Zoe crouched down to his level, looked him square in the eye, and said, "You already are, by seeing them." That hit him deep. He nodded slowly, like he was sealing a contract no one else could see. From then on, he took it seriously. He shared his lunch. He remembered names. He held the door for people who never had doors held open for them. Project Handkerchief didn't just grow, it sparked. Within 6 months, it had replicated in 3 other cities. Business schools studied its structure. Law firms started using its training. HR departments rewrote their manuals. Not because Zoe had written a perfect policy, but because she had lived a real one. She called it the Zoe effect. Not to brand it, but to remind people that systems can be changed from the sidewalk up. You just have to start with someone who refuses to walk past pain like it's invisible. Richard and Zoe still had their clashes. They didn't agree on every step, but now disagreement was part of the growth, not the resistance. They'd both changed, but what mattered more was the blueprint they'd built for others. One that said leadership isn't a corner office, it's what you do when no one's clapping. One that proved a handkerchief can clean more than a wound, it can clean a culture. And Zoe? She didn't just walk the halls now. She redesigned them. From scraped knees to boardroom keys, she carried the same steady hand. Because sometimes justice don't need a gavel, it just needs someone to care when nobody else does. Leave a comment below to let us know where you are watching from, and if you like fascinating stories like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we have another incredible story and there are many surprises waiting for you in the next parts.